Welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be taking a closer look at mathematical fractions. We'll be spending some time doing a little bit of some review to get the ideas from before down. We'll also spend some time reducing it to simplest form. We'll also spend some time adding and subtracting fractions. And in this video, we'll also review how to do mixed and improper as well. So starting with our review, you can see here a common everyday fraction, which is 3 out of 4, or also known as 3/4. And we always want to remember that the top number is known as the numerator, and the bottom number is always called the denominator. And a couple other ways of thinking about fractions is the top number means parts that you have. So here we have 3 parts, or pieces, out of a total number of full parts. So you can see right now, if we had to draw a picture for this fraction, we have 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. I'll turn it into a square here so you can see a little better. So we have our 3 parts, 1, 2, and 3, out of 4 possible parts. This one's missing, which is why it's not 100%, or 4 out of 4, if we had all of it together. Also, another little trick you can always remember with fractions is that you can always divide the numerator and the denominator. So if you took your fraction and did this to it, you would get something similar to this, which tells you the decimal. So you can always turn fractions into decimals by simply dividing them. When it comes to adding and subtracting decimals, it's pretty clear and simple how you do them, but you just have to follow a couple rules. For example, I'll give you a sample question here. If we have this right here, you always add the numerators together. So 1 plus 1 will give us the numerator 2 over 2. The denominator doesn't change when we do addition, and it's going to be that way for subtraction as well. So if I had 4 out of 4 minus 2 out of 4, that's going to equal 4 minus 2 is 2 out of, and the denominators, they stay the same all the time, which is 4. So here are 2 questions for you to solve on your own. Give it a few minutes here. You can pause the video or you can do it in your head right now. Here we have our first addition question of fractions. We have 12 over 24 plus 7 over 24. And our second question is 51 over 55 minus 17 over 55. So right away we can write down the denominators because we know they don't change. When they match up like this, we know that we can just keep them the same all the way through. So 55 on this side over here. And now using a calculator or a piece of paper or on your head, 12 plus 7 is 19. And then 51 minus 17 is 34. So I know many of you are thinking, well, what do I do if I see a question like this? And that's a really good question. All you have to do in this situation here is you still can't add them. Remember, you can only add fractions when they have common denominators. And so what we actually have to do now is we have to find a denominator that both 4 and 6 share together. And it's a little complicated, but with a little practice you can figure it out on your own. It's not too difficult. So think about your multiplication times table. What answer does 4 have that's the same as 6? You can easily do 4 times 6, but there's one a little smaller than that. What is a common answer that 4 times table and the 6 times table share? And I'll give you a clue. It might be 12. So when you think about 12, that means in order to change 3 over 4 into a 12 like this, a common denominator of 12, we had to times 4 by 3, and that equaled 12. That means you have to do this exact same thing you did here on the denominator with the numerator up top here. And so now our new question, it's no longer 3 over 4, but now it is 9 out of 12. So I'm actually going to cross this out, and this is going to become our new question, 9 out of 12. And then we're going to add that with our next question here, 2 over 6. But we have to change this to the common denominator 12 as well. So we're going to cross that out, and we're going to change that to a common denominator of 12. in order to get to 12, we did 6 times 2. That equals 12. Right there. And because we did this at the bottom, in order to get the numerator, we have to do that on the top as well. So times 2 again, up top here. That equals 4. And now we have our new question right here. And now we have common denominators. Now we know how to add this. What's the correct answer? Something over 12. Squeezing it down here. 9 plus 4 is... There you go. So take a look at this subtraction question here. We have 3/4 minus 6/12. And there's a problem here. As we noticed earlier, when adding and subtracting fractions, you must always have common denominators. This is like apples and oranges right now. This would be the apple and this is the orange, and we can't really do much with them together unless they have the same common denominator. And a second ago, I showed you how to find a common denominator by multiplication. Well, you can also do it by finding the simplest form or using division to reduce it. And again, think of your multiplication times table again. We have number 4 here, the digit 4 here, and the digit 12 here. Well, we actually don't have to do anything to this question here. Or maybe we need to do something to this question here. You actually have options here in order to figure it out and give it a chance to solve this question. And one of the ways I'll show you now, because I showed you multiplication a minute ago, I'll show you how to use division to shrink down a fraction to its simplest form to make this question work. So we're actually going to leave the 3 out of 4 the same. We're not going to touch that one. Instead, we're going to reduce 6 out of 12 so that it has a common denominator of 4. So 12 divided by what would give us the answer 4? And the correct answer, if you think about it, the answer is 3. So we're going to divide 3. 12 divided by 3 will give us 4. So now we have a common denominator of 4. And whenever we do something to the bottom, it must be done to the top as well. So just like before we had to multiply the numerator as well, well now we got to divide the numerator as well. We divided the bottom by 3, so now we divide the top by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now we have common denominators, and now we can solve our question. 3 minus 2 is 1. And we never touch the bottom when we're doing addition or subtraction, so the denominator stays the same, which is 4. And so as we wrap up our discussion and lesson on addition and subtraction of fractions, try to remember these ideas. The idea of common denominators. We can't really do much of adding and subtracting if we don't have common denominators. And common denominators is that number on the bottom of the fraction, and both parts of it need to be the same, just like this. And then we can add it together, just like that. And we also learned that if we don't have common denominators, we can use multiplication and division to either expand or reduce the fractions so they do have common denominators. But the thing we always have to remember is whenever we start messing around with our denominators, we have to mess around with the numerators as well. And so here we can see that we have a situation where we don't have common denominators. We have 4 and a 3. And we're going to use multiplication to expand them so they do have common denominators. And here if we times it by 3, we must times the top by 3, and that will give us our new fraction, which is 9 over 12. And over here, we want to have a denominator of 12. So we're going to have to times this by 4. So 3 times 4 equals 12. Well, that means you have to do this times 4 to this one as well. And that will give us our new fraction with the denominator that we want it to be, which is 6 out of 12. And now you can add the fraction together appropriately, which will give you 15 out of 12. Remember, never add or subtract the denominators, but always make sure they match up. So now we're going to move on to simplest form. We talked about it briefly a few seconds ago, and simplest form is really easy. Basically, whenever we see big fractions like this one here, 24 out of 36, simplest form just means that we can shrink it down to the very smallest fraction possible. And whenever we do simplest form, you always want to use division. Division is in knowing your times table and using division will make this quite quick and easy. When you look at 24 over 36, we know that they're multiples of which time table. Where do they match up with? Just knowing your times table between 1 and 12 will really help you with this task. If not, grab a calculator and start using hit or miss to see where you can find out how these numbers will divide into wholes. And so remember, whenever we mess with the denominator, you have to mess with the numerator as well. So I'm going to go out on a hunch because I know that these numbers look familiar and I've seen them before, and I think they're in the 12 times table. So I'm going to do 36 divided by 12, and 36 divided by 12 is 3. And whenever I divide the bottom, I have to divide the top as well. So 24 divided by 12 is 2. Now here's the tough part. Is this the simplest form? Is it done? Can it be shrunk any more? Can I divide any more digits or numbers from this answer of 2 over 3 right here? The answer is no, I can't. And the clear sign that you can't is because if I did 3 divided by 3, 2 does not divide by 3. It'll leave you with a decimal ... And you can't have something like this over 3. That doesn't make any sense. So we know that's not right. We always want nice, clean numbers in our fractions just like that. So is this the simplest form? Yes, it is, because we can no longer divide this evenly or equally anymore. And if you can't find the simplest form of a fraction, it doesn't mean it's not right. Try not to get frustrated. There's lots of fractions out there that don't have a simplest form. A clear clue, though, if they're at the simplest form or it can't be divided or shrunk anymore, are prime numbers. If you can see here, we have a prime number 7 here, which is going to prevent us from really shrinking it anymore unless it's by itself, another prime number. And so 7 over 31, there is no common multiple that we can use here to divide it. You can try dividing it by 2, you can try dividing both by 3, you can try divide each by 4, but remember, whatever you do to the bottom has to be in the top. You can't divide the bottom by 6 and then say you want to divide the top by 7. That's wrong. You can't do that. It has to be the same on the bottom and the top. So keep that in mind when you're doing simplest form. And keep that in mind, watch out for prime numbers, and remember using division to shrink it, and your knowledge of multiplication and multiples is going to help you a lot. Here's one you can work on yourself right now. If I gave you the question like this, it's a pretty easy one. What's the simplest form? Good luck.